To get through a good amount of slides, but I'm not really here to read slides to you. I'm really here to interact and give you some insight. Name is Joe Holbrook. I'm actually historically been a cloud architect, blockchain architect as of late. I have real life working experience in blockchain, and I am fairly well, I guess, publicized as well for implementing Hyperledger Fabric, R3 Corda, as well as Ethereum. Now I'm based out of Jacksonville, Florida, and I just published a brand new book called Architecting Enterprise Blockchain Solutions. And I have my dear friend George Levy here, who actually wrote the foreword to that.
It's a great book, highly recommend it.
Yes, thank you again. With that said, generally a discussion like this would be an hour, hour and a half, because of all the sort of like architectural details. So this was really meant to be a little different than the other sessions that you would typically go to in an event like this. And what I mean is this: I'm going to provide you real world insight, examples, a lot of pictures, and then I'm going to wrap it up and talk about how anyone here an integrator? VAR, vendor, anything like that? Okay. No one? Okay. But basically the session was sort of catered to give insight into how an enterprise could actually implement a blockchain. Now, I'm going to talk about, first off, let's define a blockchain. And again, here is the typical, what I would call, general discussions around, is it crypto or is it a blockchain? Now, again, I'm not going to go through that. I think we've been through that enough today and yesterday. But basically, we want to think about a cryptocurrency as basically an application on the blockchain. And again, these are some examples of just some of the thousands of stable coins, crypto coins, whatever other terms people use. I heard someone call it crypto robbery or something. Again, a lot of these coins, honestly, of course, these are pretty well known. But again, a lot of the digital currencies are just that. They're more like a money laundering scheme, I think. So I'm not here to preach that. So just be aware of that. I'm here to talk about the enterprise. Anyone here an enterprise architect, a systems analyst? Okay, excellent. Anyone else? Okay. So let's talk about Bitcoin. Okay. So Bitcoin is of course the first cryptocurrency. It was put out by the Central Intelligence. No, I'm just kidding. Who knows? Again, there's another whole scenario of where it came from, right? 2008, the white paper was released. Bitcoin went into production, I guess. As how I would say it in the enterprise, it was released to the public. So when we talk about blockchain, I'm going to focus on the enterprise. And it's really important that we consider three different definitions of blockchain. And here's the reason. If you go and you talk to your compliance officer and you say, I want to worry about data structures, they're going to look at you like, what do you mean? So we need to consider, if we're talking to our compliance officer, what is a legal definition that makes sense to that audience? A corruption-resistant string of ledger entries, etc. And then we have a business definition. So what does the business community really care about? So the board of directors want to think about what? How does it grow the business? How does it save us money? How does it get us to market quicker? These are the things that we want to think about. And now, technical data structures, right? That's, database stuff. And so it's all about proceeding to the right audience with the right definition. And I think one of the previous speakers, of course, sort of inferred on that as well. And again, I like to compare a blockchain to a book. And each page in that book we're going to write to, but we can't erase or delete it. And of course, each page entry is considered a transaction. And again, here's just a summary. For time purposes, I won't go into all the details. If you have questions, just go ahead and speak up after. But the main thing to really get about this is blockchains are revolutionary because of how trust is implemented. Now, some of the biggest use cases out there use what's called a consortium. So a consortium is what? A group of like-minded organizations that want to work together to solve a problem. And one of the things, too, to point out is blockchain enables decentralized trust. It is immutable by theory. Now, of course, there's blockchains out there that actually are not fully immutable. In other words, you can roll back the ledger if you want. But from a holistic standpoint, that's really where it should be. Now, again, it's about defining trust. Blockchains use, of course, encryption. And again, we're all aware of that. And it's funny because if you read the press, lately there was an article and CIO of Forbes that now blockchain is going to get killed by quantum computing and stuff. Again, I heard the same argument, I think, probably about 10 years ago, that the cloud was going to kill, IT in general. But in reality, what's it do? It just changes the whole. See, you get exactly. It's just changing the dynamics, right? And as an IT professional, for example, it gives you a lot of different opportunities as well. And blockchains won't be killing databases anytime soon. Matter of fact, Oracle's in the game. They're making money from it. It's basically an abstraction to them, is the way I look at it. Now, here's a nice, let me just make sure sorry. So here's a nice, graph. This is from IBM, but it was in Business Intelligence, or BI, Business Insider Intelligence, I think, where they put out basically what is sort of the expected commercial adoption of blockchain. And I thought that was interesting because when it comes to like enterprise adoption, this is actually understated, and I'll show you where some of those additional facts are. So with all the negative press about like cryptocurrencies from, in my opinion, I call it paid opposition, the media, and again, I'm not bashing anything, it's really paid opposition because the blockchain growth is actually growing, and if you look at a lot of the statistics, it's actually pretty interesting, but you don't hear about that. But again, two, it's not growing like machine learning or AI or anything, which is a much bigger marketplace. Okay, what is an enterprise blockchain? Okay, so here's that error right here, right? 2000, and when I talk about enterprise blockchains, I'm not talking about Bitcoin. I'm talking about Ethereum, I'm talking about Corda, I'm talking about basically Hyperledger as well. And those really didn't go into production until after 2015 and 2016. So we're talking 4 years. So can we expect a technology to be mature in 4 years? Probably not, right? And that's the interesting thing. Now, what does an enterprise blockchain really do for an enterprise? A lot of this, again, is a little bit more of a discussion than we can have now, but it's about permissioning. It's about letting the right actors to access your data resources. It's about faster transactions. Now, I have I'm going to talk about transactions per second here shortly, because blockchains are really slow, and that's just a fact, compared to like the Visa network. Now, when it comes to other features, again, this is just some of the features. I didn't want to talk about two of these, actually. The first is it's open source. Now, the world is going open source slowly but surely. In other words, we're starting to see really enterprise-grade applications, everything from email to operating systems, open source. And I think this is a really big deal. It also provides, for example, tamper-proof ledger, which is what? Immutability. And this is a big deal. Anyone here have to deal with compliance requirements? Compliance is not exactly fun, right? It's probably one of the less glamorous parts of your job. And this is one of those areas that we really need to address. And blockchain does it really well. Now, here's just an example pictorially. What we have here is a private blockchain. This is basically considered a permission blockchain. Common use case, basically you have a buyer and a seller using like a peer-to-peer network, for example, being able to make a transaction between two parties. But in this case here, we might have an intermediary. This could be similar to maybe what you'd see at a high level with Ripple. So there's a lot of good use cases for having a private blockchain. Now, the thing that really sells a blockchain is, does it provide value? It really is about value. And one of the things that I think really needs to be addressed when you're trying to talk blockchain with an audience is trying to understand what is the problem and how can blockchain actually address that problem. Does it actually create efficiencies? Does it remove, for example, overhead? Does it provide, for example, additional benefits like faster time to market? Does it meet compliance requirements? It's all about, does it provide value to the organization? And if the answer is no, then don't talk about blockchain. It's not gonna work, right? It's just a fact. Now, optionally, too, can the blockchain provide transparency? For example, you may want to get a private blockchain where you just have, for example, your internal employees use, and then extend it out to a public blockchain. That's called a hybrid blockchain, just like in cloud computing. Now, the goal is to provide that historical record. For example, here's an example of an international trade network using Hyperledger Fabric. Now, Hyperledger is the most widely used open source blockchain. If you go to GitHub, it exceeds any other blockchain by, from like number of forks, basically. Anyone here a developer? Develop? Okay. So you know what GitHub is and everything, right? You're very familiar with that. Yeah. Now, as far as Hyperledger Fabric, again, a lot of parts and pieces to it. One of the things I did want to point out is, for example, IBM Blockchain, AWS, even Azure have excellent blockchain as a service solutions. And I have documented I could spin up Hyperledger Fabric in IBM Blockchain basically in under probably an hour. So that's assuming you know what you're doing. In AWS, it takes longer because you have a lot of the permissioning and AWS special areas that you have to address, like security groups, etc. So a lot there. Now, another common use case is know your customer. I think that was discussed yesterday and as well today a few times. So I won't talk too much about it, but this is an area that some blockchains like Quorum really do really well at, where you could deploy Quorum. Now, Quorum is basically a fork of the Ethereum blockchain, but it's actually a private Ethereum network. It's a private network that you set it up on. And I believe it's still, well, it was actually developed by JP Morgan Chase, but I believe it was spun off earlier, a few weeks ago or a few months ago, so I haven't kept up on that totally. And the real value comes with smart contracts. Now, a smart contract, again, is, again, probably know this already, is not smart, nor is it really a contract, right? What is a smart contract? If you're a developer, if you're a programmer, you know that you need to have a certain input to get a certain output. In other words, that function needs to happen. And in the world of electronics, we would call that, and I'm a former military communications expert, and one of the things that I did a lot was radio and microwave. And one of the things I like to compare it to is X and OR. Basically, you have a 1 or a 0. It's nothing more, nothing less. For example, does the customer send you $1,250 And if the customer does, the smart contract executes. If he sends you $1,251, the contract will not execute even though he paid more, unless if you program it to actually get around that. If he sends $1,249, guess what? That condition wasn't met and that smart contract does not execute. So that's where the value is. Okay, now let's talk about enterprise blockchain frameworks. These are Hyperledger Fabric, R3 Corda, Quorum, and Ripple. Now, Ripple is more of a financial blockchain. It doesn't really support smart contracts. That is changing. But I wanted to put this together because one of the challenges when I talk blockchain is trying to put it together visually. Now, I'm a person that learns visually. And again, Grandma used to tell me basically pictures for boys, words for girls. So for me, as you notice, my presentation has a lot of diagrams and pictures and tables. So for example, we put this together, we could see some of the features that are supported. For time purposes, I won't get too deep into it. And then here's a comparing deployments. Basically, how does it compare to a public and a private blockchain? And then let's talk about transactions per second. Blockchains are not fast, okay? They are really slow. Now, Bitcoin, for example, averages about 5 TPS per second. And you can go ahead and look, for example, on different explorers, basically, to figure out what the transactions per second is at approximate time of day. But for example, Visa performs about 24,000 transactions per second.
Wow.
Libra, now Libra, when it's actually originally specified to be deployed, if and whenever that is going to average about 1,000, and that's going to be in a controlled network. Okay, Ripple, 1,500, and that's without smart contracts. And then PayPal. Okay, PayPal, right? Remember PayPal? It's been around a long time, right? And I don't think they've upgraded a darn thing in the back end, but it's probably no joke either. About 193 per second, right? Not very fast, right? Compared to Visa. And then Hyperledger, I have that in quotes because this is actually directly from Chris Ferris. He's like the Hyperledger organization's technical lead. He's got a term, technical evangelist. And that's on a good day. In reality, most Hyperledger deployments will likely never get above 1,200 or 1,000 TPS. Okay, some quotable quotes, because it wouldn't be fair not to talk about some of the visionaries and what they think about blockchain. So IBM, Ginny Rometty, I never say her name right. How do you say it? Rometty, okay. And is she still CEO? I thought she was changing.
About a week ago, she's phasing out.
She's phasing out. Okay. Again, her quote was based on what the internet did for communications. I think blockchain will do for trusted transactions. And my favorite, actually, is this gentleman. Enough said, right?
Yeah.
But after he sort of took it back a bit, right? Again, just again. So again, when it comes to understanding where the banking sector comes from, they're not really happy about blockchain.
Transaction of trust.
And again, he quotes the blockchain is real, right? So. And then my second favorite person is Bill Gates. Bitcoin is a technological tour de force. All right, let's go ahead and sum up blockchain. A couple things. I'm going to get to some areas about how we could basically look at blockchain after this and talk about some career options for those that are interested as well. Blockchain is complex technology, but it's simply a concept. And the concept is that it's about trust, right? Now, blockchain is about ledgers that are shared among computers around the world. Now, that's, of course, in a Ethereum network, for example. That's going to be an open blockchain. Ledgers should be immutable, and it is not a new technology, but blockchain in reality is nothing but a syncing of technologies that have already been there. And those technologies are what? It's going to be peer-to-peer networking, it's going to be encryption, and it's going to be programs. And programs being, basically development. All right. Now, blockchain as a service. This is an area that I really focus on. I do a good amount of proof of concepts, training around AWS and IBM deployments. And why would we want to use a blockchain as a service? Well, let's say you want to test out the notion of, does blockchain solve a problem? Or can it solve a problem? Can it provide value? Or how will it work? Now, companies today, anyone have a company that money is unlimited and never a problem to get? Probably not, right? So I know from my background selling to companies data storage and professional services, generally this is an area that companies really like because they don't have to go out and invest in IT infrastructure. They can just go ahead and deploy this on a cloud service, basically. So you don't really need to have CapEx or OpEx. You do need CapEx for IBM blockchain service. Hopefully they're not here. I've had some deployments and you don't pay attention, that bill goes way up. But again, it's still much cheaper than going out and having to purchase like a bunch of virtual machines and networking gear, right? So it's a great service. There is a cost though, just be aware. Okay, other blockchain as a service, Microsoft Azure, AWS, IBM, HPE, Oracle. And there's, I think in my book I listed, I think there's over 60 different blockchain as a service providers. So there's quite a bit. But the top 3 or 4, of course, are listed here. So why blockchain now? So a couple of thoughts on this. Basically, the financial crisis, sort of heard the same thing earlier, right? Smart people got together and said, we don't like what's going on, so let's go ahead and look at another option, right? Trust is at the center. I know that, again, it's one of those exercises where we have to be able to trust who we do business with, right? And the blockchain can help enable that. Should be tamper-proof. Now, it is disruptive to the status quo. I think the lady from IBM was sort of mentioning, right, that the status quo, right, doesn't like to have their cash cows changed, basically, right? Again, if you're making a lot of money selling services that are overpriced or maybe could be replaced by cheaper options, you want to keep it going as long as you can, right? Sort of like if you have a job where you're getting paid to do nothing, right? You wanna keep it going. They're different, right? All right. So blockchain is really a platform, and we want to have applications on that platform, such as a blockchain, such as a cryptocurrency. The goal is to provide efficiency. Okay. And here's another little slide. Let me go ahead and get it up for you. Okay, now, where are we in the tech sector phase? Basically, when it comes to technology evolution, we're pretty much, and again, you can talk to 10 different people about this in blockchain space. They'll tell you 10 different things. This is just my opinion. I've been around, the .com days. I've seen what, things can do. But basically, when it comes to investments and early adopters, I think we're really past that. Even though enterprise blockchain is only like 4 or 5 years old, I really think from a maturity standpoint, we're probably just getting to the point of growth. And hopefully that is the case. Unless if quantum computing takes over. Okay. Now, patents. Now, here's another thing that I mentioned as well. I really think we have to look at, it's sort of like that term my grandma or mom used to tell me, don't do as I say, do as I tell you, right? You ever hear that term? And here's sort of my little clue here. If you look at, for example, what some of these banks are putting out on patents, it's pretty substantial. And I have another chart coming up, I think. Give me a second. Oh, I'm sorry, I know you're taking pictures.
Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah. And these slides will be available on their SlideShare app, so feel free to download those. Again, a lot of these companies all have at least 10 or 12 patents. And Walmart being, I think, number one. IBM would be number two, at least the time that I put this together. And then, cash flow. We have to consider the money going into the technology. From a couple different organizations that did reports on this, or put together analyst reports, I should say, the spending, as you can see, is in the billions.
231.
Okay, great. I'll finish up, thank you. And here is that, again, number of patents. And here is another chart about the patents that I think IBM is actually number one. Oops. And again, you can see number of patents. Now, generally, companies aren't going to put out 200 patents unless if they actually see something there, right? Generally, that's just my thought. And also, as part of the slide deck, because of time, we're going to have to cut it a little short. I have basically a workflow for you if you want to go take a look and try to analyze basically, is your customer or is your enterprise a good fit for a blockchain? And to wrap it up, when it comes to careers, again, feel free to talk to me after. Blockchain training, of course, is out there, plenty of good programs. The main roles that are out there are generally developer roles. Anyone here, again, I think I asked earlier if you're a developer, I have a chart here. For example, if you're good in these areas, you may be a great candidate for a blockchain developer or architect role. And these are typically the top roles. And again, on LinkedIn at the time, there was, I think, about 2,000 or so. I think lately there's about 4,000 roles. I took that snapshot a while ago. And then if you're going to hire someone, again, what do you look for? I have this here. I won't read it all to you. I just want to point it out. So if your enterprise is looking to hire someone, you really need to look for certain skills. There's no question about it. And I have different roles listed here. So a developer is going to be different than a sales engineer or a professional services. PS is professional services. And then what about business development? All the people that do the fun stuff, get to go on the nice trips to Hawaii, stuff like that, right? What do you look for? And then as part of this, I have how do you create basically a blockchain center of excellence. And again, some more there. This is really meant for VARs and vendors as well. I won't read it to you because the session's got to start here in a second, and I think that's about it. So there's about 5 slides on how to get into that. Now, more resources. Again, some great resources to look at. Of course, my book is available here. I'm going to go ahead and ask George here to pick a number.
8.
Oh, no. In your head.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to raffle
You see,
off
I
a
was
book.
missing that last piece. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have specified.
Up to what number?
Let's say we got about, 2, 4, probably about 20.
Okay. Okay, I've got a number.
Okay. All right. Pick a number. You first.
Out loud?
Yep.
5.
7.
9.
9.
3.
3.
6. 10. 11. 18.
Okay.
14.
Okay, you have to go back again. Next, go ahead.
Oh gosh.
Oh, those weren't it? None of
Nope.
It was between 1 and 20?
Yep, 1 and 20.
Trying to think what wasn't said.
Remember
14?
what was said.
Just a 6.
6. Next.
1.
12.
Give it to somebody.
1.
1?
18.
18?
2.
2?
20.
20?
19.
19?
17.
Yes.
17, okay, 17 is
Wow,
it.
it took a
All
while.
right, all right.
It took a while. That was well
All
earned.
right.
I already have one. So.
I was like, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. That's cool.
Yes.
Just that up.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And I have plenty of resources on my website as well, if you're interested, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.